Susdaydang Somdo, I'm really sorry that we're not going to be able to meet in person. I hate this, but I'm starting to get congestion in my chest, and I'm coughing a bit. So I'm my whole family has COVID, so I probably have it too. So I think it's better that I make a video and I meet with you guys like this. I would like to do it on Zoom, but I think Zoom's not good because the Wi-Fi is not very good. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a subject that I think a lot of us struggle with at times, and that subject is depression. Depression is that feeling you get whenever you are overwhelmed and you're fearful, and it usually comes because there's either a big decision you need to make, or there's something bad that's happened in your life, and you just don't know how to respond to it. And so rather than moving ahead, rather than working on the problem, we kind of just get stuck, and we stay where we're at, and we have that feeling that comes over us, and it's just sadness and fear, and we don't want to move, and that's depression. That's what it is. Now, the reason I want to talk about it is because all of us in life are going to feel that at times. Some people have extreme depression, and it comes from mental illnesses, and it can be so bad that they're so depressed they can't leave their room. They don't want to go outside. They don't want to meet friends. They just stay inside and they do nothing. But most of us won't have that extreme of depression. Most of the time, it's just going to be that feeling that we're stuck, that we want to move ahead, we want to change our situation, we want to do something, but it seems really hard or impossible, and so we get that feeling that just causes us to not move, and we feel sad and afraid, and that's depression. Tonight, what I want to do is I want to first talk about depression in the way that we can overcome it. Now, the reason I want to talk about this is because Jesus gives us such a perfect example of the way that we overcome sadness, the way we overcome depression. And so today what I want to do is I want us to spend some time looking in God's Word, and I want to have us look at the way Jesus dealt with one of the hardest moments of his life. In fact, in that moment, Jesus feels a whole lot of emotions. So the scripture we're going to look at today is Matthew chapter 26, verse 36 through 39. I think you should stop the video in just a moment and read that together. But first, let me give you context to what's happening. In Matthew chapter 26, verse 36 through 39, Jesus goes to this garden to pray. And in that moment, Jesus is overwhelmed with fear and with anxiety and with sadness. And you can describe it as that feeling of depression. But it's so extreme because Jesus knows that very night he's going to be arrested. He knows that he's going to be taken to the cross the next day, and he'll be killed and tortured. And it's going to be one of the hardest moments of his life. And Jesus is fully human. He doesn't want to go through all that suffering. He doesn't want to do all those painful things. And even God is going to turn away from Jesus in that moment as our sin is put on him and judgment is put on Jesus. And so Jesus is preparing to go to the cross. But he has all these feelings that are just overwhelming him, and he's at that moment where he's wanting to move forward, he's wanting to do it, but yet he's stuck. And so I want you to see how Jesus overcomes those feelings. All right, stop the video right now and read Matthew Jumbok Mapai Pramoy Ka Samsa Pramoy Dal Samsa Prambuan. Okay. Okay, so let's go through here now and look at the ways that Jesus approaches this moment in his life whenever he's feeling all these different emotions. Now, the first thing he does in Matthew chapter 26, verse 37, is he chooses close friends to come and be with him. I love that, right? Verse 37, it says, he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee. So that's James and John. Now, Jesus knows he's coming to one of the hardest moments of his life. He's really struggling with his emotions. He's struggling with moving ahead. And so in that moment of difficulty, he doesn't face it alone. He invites three of his closest friends to be with him, to be with him. So, I have a question. Why do you think Jesus did that? Why did he not just handle his emotions all on his own? Why did he invite his friends to be with him? Stop right here and answer that question and then come back. Listen to what Proverbs 17:17 says. It says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for difficult situations. See, we need people in our lives who are going to walk beside us in difficult moments. If we try and work through our problems all alone, our sadness and depression, it usually gets worse. It doesn't get better. When we try to struggle through our situation and overcome it with our strength, we usually can't do it. But when you invite a good, kind, and godly friend into your problems, when you invite them into that moment, it's like those friends become medicine for our heart. They begin to give us comfort when we're struggling. That's what Jesus did. He invited his friends into that moment to give him comfort, to give him strength to move ahead. Now, the second thing that Jesus does is in verse 38. He begins to share his worries and share his struggles with his friends. He didn't keep it to himself. He says this, verse 38, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. He's telling his friends how he's feeling. So Jesus, he begins to share his pain with his friends. And it's interesting. Often when we simply stop and we begin to talk about all of our emotions with someone who loves us, with a friend who will be beside us and not judge us, but encourage us. When we begin to share our emotions, our fears, our sadness, something within us begins to change. We begin to open up our heart to others, and what happens just because we begin to share, we begin to find strength to move ahead. And we're not stuck in that moment anymore. It's like all of a sudden, just because we're talking about it with people who love us, we're able to say, you know what? This is hard, but you're here with me. And I find strength now to begin moving forward and facing the problem. And that's what Jesus did. And he gives us that example. And the third thing Jesus does, again in verse 38, is he asks his friends to stay and to be a part of the battle that he's going through. Right? Verse 38, Jesus says, remain here and watch with me. Now, why do you think Jesus did that? Why did he ask his friends, I guess, why did he not just assume that his friends are going to stay? But he asked them, he said, stay and pray with me. Stay and pray with me. Stay and join the battle with me. I think it's this. Jesus knows the way to work through his feelings, the way to move past this moment where he feels stuck, is to come to God in prayer. And rather than just trying to do it all on his own, he needs the encouragement. He needs the prayers of his friends to join them in that moment and to come to God together. Guys, one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself or for your friend who is depressed is to say, I am here for you, I love you, and we're going to come to God together to ask His help in this moment. And that's what Jesus does. He says, you know what? I'm struggling. I'm in pain. My sorrow, filled with sadness. Please stay with me and pray with me so that I can move past this moment. Your presence is encouraging me to keep moving forward. That's what Jesus did. Now, in this moment, and the fourth thing that Jesus does, he comes to the Father and he begins to pray. I want you to notice two things about Jesus' prayer in verse 39. Now, the fourth thing is this. He comes to God and he shares his heart completely to God. He says, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Now notice that Jesus doesn't hide his feelings from God. He doesn't say, oh God, I can do this. You know, I'm a little bit nervous, I'm a little bit scared, but I can do this. I'm okay. No, Jesus says, God, I'm struggling. Jesus says, God, I'm having a hard time. God, I don't know if I can do this on my own. God, is there any other way to escape this? This is my true feeling. And God, I'm going to share it with you. There is a lesson for us to be learned from this. God knows our heart already. And God knows that in moments of sadness and fear and depression, there are all these things going on in your head. And it is good and right to simply share those things with God and say, God, I'm hurting. God, I'm struggling. God, I don't know what to do. It's in those moments where we are honest with God that He begins to take away the fear. He begins to take away the things that are stopping us from moving ahead. When we are honest with ourselves, when we're honest with God, God begins to use that and things begin to change. So that's the fourth thing Jesus does. He truly pours his heart out to God. Now the fifth thing is this. It's the second part of the prayer, verse 39. So he starts off and he says, God, if there's any other way, please let's do it a different way. But notice what Jesus says at the end of that verse. Nevertheless, God, not what I want, but what you want. See, the fifth thing that Jesus does in those moments of sadness and fears, he trusts his future to God's wisdom, not his own. He trusts his future. He trusts the unknown to the wisdom and the greatness and the power of God, rather than how he feels in that moment. And guys, that is the right attitude that we have to take, especially when we are depressed. We need to have an attitude that says, God, I don't want to do this. God, I'm afraid to do this. God, I wish there was a different way, but God, if this is what you want, God, help me to do what you want me to do. I trust you. I trust your plan. And I trust that you are with me. You guys, letting go of control and giving our future to God is the way that we begin to overcome feelings that cause us to be fearful and sad and depressed and unable to move. When we begin to trust God so much that we say, God, it is not how I feel, but it's what you want. That's whenever we begin to be freed from that feeling of depression. We begin to move forward. Now, I'm going to read something that's outside of this Bible verse in Matthew 26. I'm going to read something in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2. So stop right here, and I want you guys to read that together. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2. See, the sixth thing that Jesus does is he fixes his eyes on a future that awaits him on the other side of this difficult moment. He puts his eyes on a future that is beyond that moment that is hard. Jesus had real fear. Jesus had real sadness. And he had real depression before he went to the cross. But he did it. He did it because he trusted God. He trusted the Father was working to bring something great out of something that was really hard. And in the end, Jesus had this big view of God and God's plan. And Jesus understood that he was a part of God's plan. God had this plan and Jesus is a part of it. And Jesus trusted that if he obeyed God, then God would take care of him beyond that moment. Because he was a part of God's plan. His eyes were fixed on something greater and further away than that moment. You guys, we are all going to go through seasons of sadness and fear and depression. And I want you to remember that Jesus knows how you feel. He had those same feelings. He went through the same struggles that we go through. And yet he overcame his fear and sadness. And he did it by doing these things. Number one, he chose close friends to be with him. Number two, he opened his soul to his friends. He shared his feelings and said, please, this is how I'm feeling. Number three, he said, please come join me in this battle. I don't want to do it alone. I can't do it by myself. Please help me in this moment. And then number four, he goes to God. And he's honest with God. And he bears his heart to God. Says, Lord, this is so hard. I don't know how I'm doing this. And number five, Jesus said, yet God, it is not what I want. It's what you want. I trust you. You are greater than me. I know that you have me in your hands. And number six, Jesus fixed his eyes on the future that would come beyond that moment that was difficult. Guys, my prayer is that, I don't want any of you to struggle. I don't want any of you to go through times of depression, but you will. And when you do it, seek God. Do it, not by yourself, with your friends, with godly friends that will encourage you to come to God, to share with God your pain, but to surrender to him, knowing that he is going to take care of you. I love you guys. I wish I was with you. But thank you for praying for me. I'm praying for you. God bless.